Barron Trump sees a woman crying on a bench. When he finds out she's the daughter of a missing war hero, what he does next will touch your heart and inspire everyone. On a quiet autumn afternoon in London, the charm of Hyde Park unfolded like a scene from a painting. Golden leaves blanketed the paths, swirling gently in the crisp breeze. A soft mist hung in the air, blurring the edges of reality and giving the park an almost dreamlike quality. The usual bustle of joggers and tourists was replaced by a serene silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and distant chirping of birds. Among the winding trails, a tall young man in a grey hoodie walked alone, his face partially obscured by the hood. Barron Trump, the youngest son of a former president, was seeking a moment of peace, a rare escape from the relentless spotlight that followed him everywhere. His hands were tucked into his hoodie pockets as he strolled aimlessly, his eyes scanning the quiet surroundings. For a boy who had grown up under the harsh gaze of public scrutiny, this solitude was both unfamiliar and deeply comforting. As he turned a corner, Barron's steps slowed. On a weathered wooden bench near the edge of a small lake, he noticed a young woman sitting alone. Her head was bowed, her shoulders hunched against the chill. She clutched something tightly in her hands, a folded military flag, its stars and stripes dark against her pale skin. Even from a distance, Barron could see the faint tremor in her frame. Her face, streaked with tears, was turned toward the ground, lost in a private grief that seemed to weigh heavier than the crisp air around her. She looked heartbreakingly young, perhaps in her early 20s, yet her sorrow seemed to carry the burden of a lifetime. Barron hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should approach her. What could he say to ease a pain so evident, so raw? But something about her struck a chord deep within him. Perhaps it was the way she clung to the flag, as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the world. Or maybe it was the loneliness that radiated from her, a feeling he knew all too well, even amidst his privileged life. Gathering his courage, Barron stepped closer. The crunch of leaves underfoot made her look up, her tear-filled eyes meeting his. For a moment, neither spoke. The contrast between them was stark, his tall, imposing figure, his face calm yet curious, and her fragile frame, her expression a mix of grief and surprise. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice carrying a kindness that matched the gentleness in his gaze. And so, in the quiet heart of London, under the golden canopy of autumn, a story began, one of compassion, understanding, and the power of human connection. Barron Trump strolled quietly through the golden paths of Hyde Park, the cool autumn breeze brushing against his face. The world around him was serene, yet his mind felt heavy, lost in thought. That's when he noticed her, a young woman sitting alone on a wooden bench, her shoulders trembling as she clutched a folded military flag to her chest. Her sobs were soft but unmistakable, echoing in the stillness of the park. Her face, streaked with tears, told a story of deep sorrow and longing. The flag in her hands seemed to carry more than just fabric, it carried memories, pain, and perhaps a loss too heavy to bear. As Barron watched her from a distance, an image flashed through his mind. He imagined a soldier, proud and strong, holding a little girl in his arms. She was laughing, her tiny hands clutching his uniform as he spun her around. It wasn't real, it was just a glimpse, a fleeting thought, but it felt as if he could almost see her life before this moment of heartbreak. He hesitated. Approaching a stranger was not something he did easily, especially when emotions ran so raw. Yet, there was something about her grief that struck a chord deep within him. It felt too familiar to ignore, like a pain he had seen but never fully understood. Taking a deep breath, Barron walked toward her. The leaves crunched softly beneath his shoes, and as he got closer, her tear-filled eyes lifted to meet his. In that moment, the world seemed to pause, a quiet connection formed between two strangers in the heart of London, bound by the unspoken weight of sorrow. Barron approached cautiously, his footsteps light against the gravel path. He hesitated a moment before softly asking, "Are you okay?" The young woman flinched slightly, startled. She looked up, her tear-streaked face catching the faint glow of the park lights. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, held a mixture of sadness and vulnerability. Quickly, she brushed at her tears, as if trying to hide her pain, but she didn't answer. Barron knelt down to her level, keeping a respectful distance. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said gently, his voice calm and reassuring. You seem upset. Is there anything I can do to help?" For a moment, the woman said nothing. She glanced at the folded flag in her lap, her fingers tightening around its edges. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She looked back at Barron, her expression wary but touched by his genuine concern. I'm fine," she mumbled, though her voice trembled. He gave her a small, understanding nod. "Sometimes it helps to talk. I'm Barron, by the way." She hesitated, her eyes studying him as if deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she whispered, "I'm Clara." "Hi, Clara," he said, offering a soft smile. "Do you want to talk about it?" She exhaled shakily, the weight of her emotions breaking through. "It's my dad," she began, her voice quivering. "He was a soldier. He didn't come back." Barron's heart ached at her words. He nodded, staying silent, letting her know she could take her time. As she continued, her voice faltered but carried the weight of her story, a story of loss, love, and a father who had given everything. And for the first time in a long time, Clara felt like someone was truly listening. Barron sat on the edge of the bench, leaning slightly forward, his full attention on Clara. Her hands trembled as they gripped the folded flag tighter, her eyes fixed on the ground. For a moment, she hesitated, as if speaking the words would make the pain even more real. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began. "My dad was my hero," she said, her words catching in her throat. "He wasn't just a soldier, he was my everything. He taught me how to ride a bike, how to tie my shoelaces, how to stand up for myself. But he was also a decorated war veteran, and he loved his country as much as he loved me." Her voice faltered, and Barron noticed her knuckles whiten as she held the flag even closer. "He died 3 years ago, in service. They said it was an ambush, that he didn't stand a chance. All they brought back was this flag." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and her lips trembled as she looked down at it. "This is all I have left of him." Barron's chest tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but he knew this wasn't the time. She needed to speak, and he needed to listen. "After he died, everything fell apart," Clara continued, her voice breaking. "We lost our home. My mom, she tried, but she couldn't handle it. She's living with relatives now, but I didn't fit. I just felt like a burden." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "I've been on my own for over a year now. I thought I could make it, that I could find a job, rebuild something. But it's so hard. It's like the world moves on, but you're stuck in this place where everything reminds you of what you've lost." Her shoulders slumped as if the weight of her words had drained the last bit of strength she had left. "I sit here sometimes, wondering if he'd be proud of me. But then I think, how could he be? I've failed at everything. I couldn't even hold my family together." Barron's throat tightened, and he swallowed hard to keep his emotions in check. He had grown up with every privilege imaginable, yet here was Clara, carrying unimaginable pain and loss with a strength that humbled him. "Clara," he said softly, his voice steady but full of emotion, "I don't think for a second that your dad wouldn't be proud of you. Look at what you've been through, most people wouldn't even be able to stand after what you've endured. But you're here. You're fighting. That takes incredible strength." She looked up at him then, her tear-filled eyes searching his face for sincerity. "Do you really think so?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I know so," he said firmly. "I've met people with every advantage in the world who couldn't handle a fraction of what you've been through. You've survived things that would break most people. That's not failure, Clara, that's resilience. She let out a shaky breath, a faint glimmer of something, hope, perhaps, flickering in her eyes. But I feel so lost, she admitted. Like I don't know who I am anymore. I'm just, drifting. Barron nodded, his own emotions welling up. I think we all feel lost sometimes, he said. Even people like me, who seem like they have everything. But you're not alone. You've got people out there who care, even if you don't see them right now. She wiped her eyes, her grip on the flag loosening slightly. I just miss him so much, she whispered. I miss his laugh, his voice, the way he made me feel like everything was going to be okay. Barron felt his own eyes sting with unshed tears. I can't imagine how much you miss him, he said gently. But I can promise you this, his love for you didn't end when he passed. It's still here. It's in every memory, every lesson, and every time you fight to keep going. That's his legacy, Clara. She looked at him, her lips trembling as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Instead, she simply nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. For a moment, the park seemed to fall completely silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Barron reached out, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. You're not alone anymore, he said quietly. We'll figure this out together. Clara let out a shaky breath, her body relaxing slightly under his reassuring touch. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. And as the golden leaves of the park swirled around them, a faint glimmer of hope began to take root in her heart. Barron took a deep breath, his gaze steady as he looked at Clara. You're not alone anymore, he said softly, his voice calm but filled with conviction. I can't begin to understand all the pain you've gone through, but I want to help. Clara looked up at him, her tear-filled eyes searching his face, trying to grasp the sincerity in his words. Why? She asked hesitantly. Why would you care about someone like me? Barron crouched slightly so they were at eye level, his hands resting on his knees. Because I know what it feels like to be misunderstood, he began, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. I know what it's like to feel invisible, like people see what they want to see instead of who you really are. She blinked, her expression softening as his words sank in. My life might look perfect from the outside, Barron continued, but I've had moments where I've felt completely out of place, like I didn't belong. People judge me because of my name, my family. They think they know me, but they don't. It's isolating. Clara nodded slowly, her grip on the flag loosening slightly. I guess I never thought about it that way, she admitted. Barron smiled faintly. Everyone carries their own struggles, Clara. Yours are heavy, but they don't define you. What defines you is the strength it takes to keep going, even when it feels impossible. Her lips trembled as she whispered, it's hard to believe things can get better. They can, Barron said firmly. And they will. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out together. Clara's gaze dropped to the folded flag in her lap, her fingers brushing its edges. I don't even know where to start, she said quietly. Barron reached out, his hand gently touching her shoulder. You start by taking one step. Just one. And I'll be right here to help you take the next one. For the first time in what felt like forever, Clara's lips curved into a faint, hopeful smile. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Barron nodded. We'll take it one day at a time, he assured her. But I promise, you won't have to face any of this alone anymore. In that moment, something shifted. The despair that had weighed so heavily on Clara's heart lightened, replaced by the smallest flicker of hope. Barron gently helped Clara to her feet, noticing how frail and tired she seemed. Let's get you somewhere warm, he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. They walked together to a nearby cafe, its cozy interior glowing with the soft light of the late afternoon. As they entered, the warmth of the cafe wrapped around them, and Barron guided Clara to a corner table. "Sit here," he said softly, motioning to the chair. "I'll grab us something to eat." Moments later, he returned with 2 steaming cups of tea and plates of sandwiches. Clara hesitated at first but eventually took small bites, the color slowly returning to her pale cheeks. As they ate, a passerby outside the cafe spotted them through the window. Intrigued by the sight of Barron Trump talking earnestly with a woman clutching a folded military flag, the passerby discreetly took a photo. It wasn't long before the moment began to gain attention online, though Barron remained unaware, fully focused on helping Clara. Between sips of tea, Barron began to make calls. He contacted organizations that specialized in supporting war veterans and their families. He explained Clara's situation, emphasizing her need for immediate shelter and support. The cafe buzzed softly around them, but Clara sat quietly, her eyes fixed on the folded flag in her lap, occasionally glancing at Barron as he spoke. After a few calls, Barron looked at Clara with a reassuring smile. "I've found a place for you to stay," he said. "It's a temporary shelter, but they'll make sure you're safe and have everything you need." Tears welled up in Clara's eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't have to," Barron replied gently. "This is just the beginning." The next morning, Clara woke up in a warm bed at the shelter Barron had arranged for her. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Meanwhile, the quiet act of kindness they shared at the cafe was creating a ripple effect far beyond what anyone could have imagined. The photo of Barron and Clara, taken by the passerby, began circulating on social media. Captioned with the words, "A moment of humanity," it quickly went viral. People were drawn to the image of Barron, a public figure often shrouded in mystery, kneeling beside a grieving woman clutching a flag. The story behind the photo resonated deeply, and thousands began sharing their thoughts and support online. The comments section was flooded with words of encouragement and empathy. Many shared their own stories of losing loved ones in service, while others praised Barron for stepping up in such a heartfelt way. "This is what the world needs more of, compassion and action," one comment read. Soon, donations began pouring in. Organizations supporting veterans' families reached out, offering Clara long-term assistance. Strangers from across the country sent messages of hope, reminding Clara that she wasn't alone. Within days, she had enough financial support to start rebuilding her life. Clara's story became a symbol of resilience and the power of small actions to create lasting change. Inspired by the outpouring of kindness, she decided to honor her father's legacy by advocating for other struggling veterans' families. Barron, true to his promise, remained in touch, quietly supporting her efforts. What began as a moment of quiet sorrow in a park transformed into a wave of hope. Clara's story reminded the world of the struggles many face in silence and the incredible impact of one act of kindness. As Barron walked through the park again a week later, he found himself reflecting on the encounter that had unexpectedly changed him. The memory of Clara's tear-streaked face and her unwavering courage stayed with him. He had always believed kindness mattered, but this experience had shown him its true power. A simple gesture, a moment of listening, could ripple into something far greater. For Clara, life was beginning to take shape again. With the support of Barron and the many people who rallied around her, she found not only stability but also purpose. Determined to honor her father's memory, she started working with organizations dedicated to supporting veterans' families. Speaking at events and sharing her story, Clara inspired others to step forward and lend a hand to those who often suffered in silence. Barron kept in touch with Clara, quietly cheering her on from the sidelines. He had no desire for recognition or credit. The real reward was seeing someone who had once felt lost now shine with a renewed sense of hope and determination. He couldn't help but smile as he thought about how far she had come in such a short time. This experience reminded Barron, and those who followed his story, that the smallest acts of kindness could ignite profound change. It wasn't about grand gestures or making headlines, it was about connecting, understanding, and simply being there for someone in need. As he left the park that day, he felt lighter, more grounded. He knew he would carry this lesson with him for the rest of his life. Sometimes, a simple act of kindness can reconnect us to the humanity we often overlook, Barron thought. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. Together, let's spread compassion and remind the world of the power of kindness.